Today, I will explain a book called Learned Optimism. This book has over 360 pages, and I will take about 25 minutes to discuss the essence of the book. How to become an optimistic person. Before we get started, please click on the subscribe button below to stay updated and support Daily Book Dive. Recall, you've definitely encountered such people around you. When bad things happen, they can't even sleep, exaggerating a minor setback as if it heralds major disaster, akin to the sky falling. These are the pessimists we often talk about. You might have also noticed that the term depression appears more frequently nowadays. When pessimism develops to a serious extent, it turns into depression. Studies have shown that there are 10 times more people with severe depression now than 50 years ago. And the onset of depression occurs 10 years earlier than the previous generation, with a considerable number of children and teenagers affected. 30 years of psychological research indicate that your thoughts influence your circumstances. And habitual pessimistic thoughts bring more misfortune onto us, creating a vicious cycle. Hence, pessimistic prophecies are often self-fulfilled. So, how do we combat pessimism? This book will tell you the methods to learn optimism. The author of this book is Martin Seligman, a master of American psychology. He led psychology to not only focus on the dark, fragile, and painful sides of humanity, but also to pay attention to human virtues and strengths, strongly advocating for the establishment of positive psychology, thus earning the title of the father of positive psychology. The book provides the theoretical foundation for optimism. Seligman introduces his most important discovery in the book, the theory of learned helplessness. Learned refers to the acquisition of skills through learning and practice, and learned helplessness means that people, from their experiences of failure, develop a despairing cognition that no matter how hard they try, they cannot change the current situation or achieve success. This sense of despair and helplessness forms a habitual thinking pattern, deeply affecting people's behavioral styles. This discovery in the 1960s had a profound impact on the entire field of psychology. Previously, psychology did not concern itself with patterns of thinking. When explaining human behavior, it only focused on the impact of external environments. For example, the Freudian school believed that unresolved conflicts in childhood lead to certain behaviors in adulthood. Behaviorists thought that the environment shapes behavior. Until the 1960s, Seligman's theory of learned helplessness directly overturned the behaviorist school's theory that behavior only changes in response to rewards or punishments. His research shifted psychology's focus entirely onto people's internal thoughts. The book teaches the general public a method to master optimism. Unlike success studies, which only offer empty slogans, it presents a brand new way of thinking, repeatedly validated by psychologists and psychiatrists through experiments and clinical practice, proving to be genuinely effective. Once you learn it, this skill will follow you for life. An optimistic cognitive style helps you escape depression, improve achievements, and enhance your health. Therefore, upon its release, the book was hugely popular, and its optimistic method has been used by companies like IBM, Google, and General Electric to enhance employee happiness. It has also become one of the most popular happiness classes at Harvard. In this update, I will explain the book from several aspects: the source of pessimism, the operational mechanisms of pessimistic thinking, and methods to transform pessimistic thinking into optimistic thinking. Let's start by discussing the source of pessimism, which is learned helplessness. Let's look at self-portraits of pessimists and optimists. When optimists encounter bad things, they believe the failure is temporary. And each failure has its reasons, which are not their fault. It might be due to the environment, luck, or other external causes. Optimists view failure as a challenge and try harder to overcome it. On the other hand, pessimists believe that bad things are their own fault, that these mishaps will ruin their lives and persist for a long time. What exactly causes this pessimistic thought? The author says, at the core of pessimism is a sense of helplessness. What is helplessness? It is the feeling that no matter what you do, you cannot change your fate. For example, if you are asked to write a speech for a company leader with a reward of $2,000, you might spend several nights to do it. But if you are asked to participate in a singing contest, winning which could get you $20,000, you would want to bet you can't achieve it because you are tone deaf and no amount of training can make you sing well. That is the feeling of helplessness. This helplessness exists from the moment a person is born. A newborn baby cannot do much. When uncomfortable, they reflexively cry, which makes their mother come. As babies grow, they gradually learn personal control, which is using their own behavior to change their fate. By 3 to 4 months, babies can control their hands and feet, and they can control their crying. By about 1 year old, they learn to talk and walk. As they grow, they gain more personal control and gradually overcome helplessness. However, there are some things in life we cannot control, like the color of our eyes, our race, our family. But there is still a lot we can control, like how we interact with others, how we live, how we earn money. Different people have different degrees of helplessness and control. So, why do some people seem so pessimistic? The author suggests that it is acquired helplessness that creates pessimistic thoughts, which means they have learned and reinforced a sense of helplessness at some point. Let's look at a classic experiment. The author conducted an experiment with 3 groups of dogs. In a large box divided by a low gate, one side of the box administers electric shocks. The dogs can jump over the low gate from the shocked side to the other side to avoid the electric shocks. Before the official start of the experiment, he made the 3 groups of dogs undergo some processes. The experimenters shocked the first group of dogs while showing them that they could avoid the shock by their own efforts, teaching them to touch a button on the wall with their noses to stop the electric shock. The second group of dogs experienced that no matter how they barked, jumped, or struggled, the electric shock would not stop, and the third group of dogs were not subjected to any electric shocks. After these processes, the experiment officially started, and the researchers subjected the 3 groups of dogs to electric shocks in succession. What was the result? The first group, the dogs that were taught to control the shock with their noses, found within a few seconds that they could jump over the low gate to avoid the shock. The third group, the dogs that had not been trained, also jumped over the low gate within a few seconds. But the second group, the dogs that had been trained that no matter what they did, the shock would not stop, stayed on the side with the electric shocks, enduring the shocks and doing nothing. From this, the author concluded about learned helplessness. The theory of learned helplessness says that people only develop thoughts of giving up when they feel that whatever they do is futile, just like the second group of dogs in the experiment. They experienced that no matter what they did, the electric shock would not stop, which is learned helplessness created by the researchers. In contrast, when people feel they have control over a situation, they will not give up. Just like the first group of dogs. They knew the shock could be controlled. In the following 20 years, psychologists conducted extensive research on learned helplessness, and all the experimental results were very consistent. These results identified the source of learned helplessness: experience. When a person or small animal learns that no matter what they do, it's useless, their behavior can't bring them what they want, then this experience makes them feel that their behavior will still be ineffective in the future. This is to say, the experience of learned helplessness causes a person's pessimistic way of thinking. This is the first point discussed today. Pessimism originates from the experience of learned helplessness. People only develop thoughts of giving up when they feel that whatever they do is futile. If they learn that no matter what they do, it's useless, then this experience makes them feel that their behavior will still be ineffective in the future, turning them into pessimistic people. Pessimists believe that bad things are their own fault, that these mishaps will ruin their lives and persist for a long time. Second part. Next, let's look at how your explanatory style determines whether you are optimistic or pessimistic. What is explanatory style? It's your habitual way of explaining why things happen. This explanatory style is a modulator of learned helplessness. An optimistic explanatory style can prevent learned helplessness, while a pessimistic explanatory style spreads it. Explanatory style is actually a way of thinking, like a word in your mind, whether it is yes or no, which determines how helpless or spirited you are when faced with setbacks. Your explanatory style determines whether you are optimistic or pessimistic. A pessimist's explanatory style is like this. They believe that the bad things that happen to them are permanent, pervasive, and personalized. What does that mean? Let's take an example. Katie is a girl who is dieting. She wants to lose weight through this method. One day after work, she went out for drinks with her colleagues and ate some fried chicken wings and fries. When she got home, she immediately regretted it immensely. She told herself, "Because of tonight, all the dieting efforts I made before are completely wasted. I'm really too weak, always unable to resist the temptation to binge eat, and I can't stick to anything. They must think I'm a fool. Since the diet plan is ruined anyway, I might as well eat a whole box of chocolate cake now." Then she ate an entire box of chocolate cake. Let's analyze Katie's explanatory style. First, she negates the entire diet plan because of one evening's exception, feeling that the efforts she made before are permanently ineffective. Then she thinks she always succumbs to temptation and can't stick to anything, which is a pervasive explanation. And she attributes her lack of control to being too weak, which is a personalized explanation. To sum up, a pessimistic explanatory style has three dimensions: permanence, pervasiveness, and personalization. What consequences does this explanatory style bring? Pessimists believe that the bad things that happen to them will forever affect their lives, extending feelings of helplessness into the future. Attributing good things to luck and pervasiveness makes them believe that they can't do anything right, spreading feelings of helplessness to all aspects of life, with a 100% impact rate. Personalization controls how you view yourself and your feelings about yourself. Pessimists always blame themselves, seeing faults that aren't their own as their own mistakes. On the other hand, optimists are the exact opposite. They believe that the reasons for bad things are temporary and due to specific reasons, which limits the time and scope of helplessness. And they attribute good things to permanent factors of their personality. Actually, the reason optimists can always be hopeful is not because their lives are better than pessimists. Optimists face setbacks and displeasures just as much as anyone else, but they handle them better. They recover quickly after being hit, so they perform better in their careers, academics, and sports, and they are healthier and live longer. Whereas pessimists, even if things go their way, still worry about the unknowns of the future. Let's summarize the second point. Your explanatory style determines whether you are optimistic or pessimistic. A pessimistic explanatory style is permanent, pervasive, and personalized. They believe that bad things will forever affect their lives. The impact range extends to all aspects, and bad outcomes are due to their own faults. On the other hand, optimists believe that the reasons for bad things are temporary and due to specific reasons, which limits the time and scope of helplessness, and they attribute good things to permanent factors of their personality. So, if you are a pessimist, what should you do? Third part. Lastly, let's look at just as helplessness can be learned, so too can optimism. You might say, learning to be optimistic is just adopting a positive attitude, right? Actually, it's not. People have long discovered that telling themselves affirmations is actually useless. Learned optimism teaches you a non-negative way of thinking. Unlike so-called positive thinking, the skills of learned optimism involve changing the destructive thoughts in situations of failure. It is a science that enhances personal control. So, since learned helplessness is the source of pessimism, then showing a pessimist that their actions are effective, indeed bringing them what they want, could it change their view of the reasons for failure? Thus, the author continued his experiments on learned helplessness. He put the second group of dogs, the dogs that had learned helplessness, back into the box and manually dragged these unwilling dogs back and forth, forcing them over the middle barrier until they moved on their own. Researchers found that once these dogs discovered that their actions were effective in avoiding electric shocks, their helplessness was cured. And this cure was 100% effective and permanent. This experiment has significant implications for preventing helplessness, such as teaching a puppy that its actions are effective, which gives it lifelong immunity to helplessness. Some might ask, dogs are like this. Are people the same? At the time, a Japanese-American psychologist, following the author's dog experiment, also conducted an experiment on people, using noise instead of electric shocks. The experimental results were strikingly consistent with what the author did, which means that pessimistic thought patterns can be changed. The author introduces in the book a psychological treatment method called cognitive therapy, a concept discovered by the famous psychologist Albert Ellis and psychiatrist Beck, which has been gradually developed since the 1960s and is now widely used in treating depression. Cognitive therapy can create an optimistic explanatory style, and this skill can be mastered through learning and will stay with you once you've learned it. Let's summarize the third point. Just like helplessness can be learned, so too can optimism. Using cognitive therapy, showing a pessimist that their actions are effective, indeed bringing them what they want, can correct the thinking pattern of learned helplessness, changing pessimism into optimism. How exactly do you do this? Let's look at the fourth content, also the most important content, the ABCDE method of living optimistically. Fourth part. In emotion control, there is a theory called ABC theory of emotions. A represents adversity, representing bad things. B for belief, representing your thoughts about this event. C for consequence, representing the behavior you perform according to your thoughts. That is, the outcome. The author has further developed this ABC model by adding D for disputation and E for energization. Let's look at each one. Every one of us has our own ABC pattern, that is, how you think and act when something bad happens. It's your explanatory style. First, you need to identify your ABC pattern, that is, to recognize the relationship between the bad things, your thoughts, and the outcomes. For example, in the previous example of Katie's diet, the A here is Katie breaking her diet plan by eating fries and chicken wings, which is a bad thing. C is Katie giving up completely, abandoning the entire diet plan and then eating an entire box of cake, which is the consequence. B is Katie's view of herself. She thinks she is weak, believes that the entire diet plan is ruined, and that she can't do anything right. The reason Katie performed the C behavior after A occurred is because of her explanatory style, which is permanent, pervasive, and personalized. In plain terms, she is a pessimist. Katie needs to first recognize her own ABC pattern in order to correct her behavior. Can you accurately state your ABC pattern now? Probably not. Because it is fleeting, it may also be a subconscious psychological activity. To identify your ABC pattern, you need to pay attention to what you usually don't notice, to the words you say to yourself and the emotions that appear when you encounter unpleasant experiences. For example, you're talking on the phone with a friend, and he seems impatient to hang up. You find yourself feeling very bad afterwards. This is what you need to pay attention to. A good method is to keep a journal, recording the daily events, and finding out how these ABCs operate in your daily life. The journal doesn't need to be too long, just spend a day or two recording 5 ABC cases. When recording, pay attention to being objective and accurate. For example, the A you record. The bad thing is, my friend hung up the phone in a hurry. Not that he is annoyed with you. Because it needs to record objective facts, not your subjective judgment. When recording B, you can write, he is annoyed with me. He doesn't want to contact me anymore, etc. This is your inference and explanation of the event. C, you can record your feelings and actions, such as, I feel very uncomfortable. I feel powerless, very tired. I want him to apologize to me, etc. After you have recorded, please carefully read it again. Find out the relationship between your thoughts B and the consequences C. You will see that a pessimistic explanatory style will lead to passive and listless behavior, while an optimistic explanatory style will make you spirited. If you find that you always hold a pessimistic explanatory style, then the following skill is very useful for you. That is the skill of disputation, which means opposing your own thoughts, arguing with your own thoughts. When you learn to argue with yourself, you can effectively prevent the pessimistic explanatory style from hurting you again, and the next time you encounter something bad, you won't be depressed again. Imagine a scenario. If you are scolded by a drunk on the street, how would you think? You definitely don't agree with what he said. Most people will keep a distance from these unreasonable accusations. But what if the accusation comes from ourselves? You definitely won't doubt your own views. But if you think this way, you are very wrong. It's actually very difficult to keep a distance from your own accusations. But think carefully. The words you say to yourself when you encounter setbacks are actually as baseless as those said by people with ill intentions. People's self-explanations are often distorted, possibly caused by unhappy childhood experiences such as childhood conflicts, strict parents, harsh teachers, sibling jealousy, etc. But just because these thoughts come from yourself, you naturally think they are right. But the skill of disputation allows you to check whether your subconscious thoughts are correct, keeping a distance from your pessimistic explanations. So, how do you argue? Actually, Everyone has the experience of arguing, such as when you argue and debate with others. It is like a patrol squad. When you argue with yourself, you also need to be like a detective, looking for evidence, checking where the evidence for your thoughts is. For example, Katie thinks her dieting efforts have been completely wasted, but she can calculate the calories of the fries and chicken wings, and she will find that these add up to only a bit more than the calories of dinner. Since she didn't eat dinner, it's basically offset, actually not a big deal. Again, Katie thinks she is weak and incapable, but she can recall that she has stuck to her diet plan for 2 weeks, which proves she is strong, not a weak-willed person. In fact, several people have said she looks thinner. Usually, there are many reasons why something happens. Why pick the most damaging reason? Every time you look for evidence for your thoughts like a detective, select all possible reasons. Ask yourself, can you find another angle to look at this event, and then focus on changeable, specific, non-personalized reasons, such as I only binge eat when I go out to eat. He snapped at me because he was in a bad mood. It's only this teacher, not all teachers, who don't like me. So after Katie finds evidence proving she is not weak, she discovers that her diet plan has not been ruined. Rather, it is her permanent, pervasive, and personalized explanatory style that makes her not want to continue. Your task is to break this highly damaging habitual thinking, training yourself to look for all possibilities. Okay, this is what we call D, the skill of disputation. You might ask, sometimes it's really not just me scaring myself. The situation is really bad. Then you need the last E, the skill of energization. Energization is the mental and behavioral result brought about by disputation. Energization allows you to test whether the change in your way of thinking after going through the disputation step, repeatedly verifying, has brought about a change in behavior, or in other words, it can help you find more meaningful solutions. For example, after you go through the disputation step and repeatedly verify, proving that your negative view is correct. What should you do at this time? The author says you should adopt a non-disastrous solution. What does that mean? That is, although the situation is very bad, it does not mean that this situation will bring disaster if it continues. Imagine. If you act according to negative thoughts, most likely you will give up hope and give up completely, just like Katie at the beginning. At this time, you can think about what the implication of doing this is. Even if Katie ate fries and chicken wings, it doesn't mean she has to break the rules and binge eat. Katie should ask herself, is the negative thought useful to her? Sometimes, preventing these thoughts from causing damage is more important than whether these thoughts conform to the facts. Thinking she is a glutton will make Katie sabotage her diet plan, causing more negative emotions, which is not beneficial. So you might as well not care whether your thoughts are correct, just argue against them. Or simply ignore them and continue living your life. For example, a bomb disposal expert. If he always tells himself, if the bomb explodes, I will die, then his hands will definitely tremble. When you have to do this thing, you can tell yourself, don't think about whether this thought is correct, think about whether it is useful to me. Now, we have finished talking about the ABCDE therapy. When you can skillfully use this method, you can put aside your notebook and completely conduct this training in your mind. Now, let's look at a complete example of using this therapy to more intuitively show how these 5 steps are used. Mary and her husband David planned to go to the movies on the weekend to celebrate their 20th wedding anniversary. But they ended up arguing about whether their daughter could drive out for a date, and then argued about whether to use some of their retirement savings to build a balcony in their bedroom. Mary's first thought was, I knew it was difficult for us to be alone together. When we are together, we always argue nonstop. David is so stubborn about everything. He is really selfish. Never willing to compromise. I'm so annoyed by this. Then she described her feelings at the moment in her mind. I'm really angry. I can't calm down at all. I can't even stand to listen to him speak. He still wants to continue discussing later. The more I think about it, the angrier I get. Then, Mary silently recorded her ABC pattern in her mind. When she realized that her negative thinking was running too fast, she told herself to slow down, so she put the brakes on herself, reminding herself to keep a certain distance from the thoughts that just jumped out, and then she started to argue with herself. She thought in her mind, wait a minute, I am indeed very angry. But am I exaggerating the situation? David indeed does not like to compromise, nor does he want to spend our retirement savings. He is indeed not as casual as me, but he is not too stubborn. He has given up what he wanted for me and the kids before, like last summer. He gave up the travel plans he had carefully prepared, complying with me and the kids. I can't call him selfish. He has changed jobs and moved for my work before. He sacrificed a lot for that. Maybe he is just anxious about our daughter growing up, thinking about our daughter going out on dates with those guys, which is indeed nerve-wracking. And building a balcony will spend a large part of our savings. I should understand why he feels uneasy. You see, Mary successfully collected evidence to prove that David is not as selfish as she thought. She also differentiated between facts and disaster, powerfully disputing her previous pessimistic thoughts. In the end, Mary felt much calmer, although still a little angry. She didn't feel as bad as before. She put aside the issues with her daughter and the balcony and could continue to enjoy the remaining weekend time. Now, let's summarize the ABCDE therapy. A represents bad things. B represents your thoughts about this event. C represents the consequences. D represents disputation. E represents energization. First, you need to identify your ABC pattern. Pay attention to what you say to yourself and the emotions that appear when you encounter unpleasant experiences, and find out the relationship between your thoughts B and the consequences C. If you find that you always hold a pessimistic explanatory style, then you need to argue with yourself, debate with your thoughts. It can help you check whether your subconscious thoughts are correct. You need to be like a detective, looking for evidence, collecting all possible reasons, asking yourself, can you find another angle to look at this event? And then focus on changeable, specific, non-personalized reasons. The last step is energization. It helps you verify your behavior. Finding more meaningful solutions. Don't think about whether this thought is correct. Think about whether it is useful to you. In conclusion, let's review the main content of this book again. First, pessimism originates from the experience of learned helplessness. People only develop thoughts of giving up when they feel that whatever they do is futile. If they learn that no matter what they do, it's useless, then this experience makes them feel that their behavior will still be ineffective in the future, turning them into pessimistic people. Second, your explanatory style determines whether you are optimistic or pessimistic. A pessimistic explanatory style is permanent, pervasive, and personalized. They believe that bad things will forever affect their lives. The impact range extends to all aspects, and bad outcomes are due to their own faults. On the other hand, optimists believe that the reasons for bad things are temporary and due to specific reasons, which limits the time and scope of helplessness. And they attribute good things to permanent factors of their personality. Third, optimism can be learned using cognitive therapy. Showing a pessimist that their actions are effective, indeed bringing them what they want, can correct the thinking pattern of learned helplessness, changing pessimism into optimism. The specific method is to learn the ABCDE therapy. A represents bad things. B represents your thoughts about this event. C represents the consequences. D represents disputation. E represents energization. First, you need to identify your ABC pattern. Pay attention to what you say to yourself and the emotions that appear when you encounter unpleasant experiences, and find out the relationship between your thoughts B and the consequences C. If you find that you always hold a pessimistic explanatory style, then you need to argue with yourself. Debate with your thoughts. It can help you check whether your subconscious thoughts are correct. You need to be like a detective, looking for evidence, collecting all possible reasons, asking yourself, can you find another angle to look at this event? And then focus on changeable, specific, non-personalized reasons. The last step is energization. It helps you verify your behavior, finding more meaningful solutions. Don't think about whether this thought is correct. Think about whether it is useful to you. Actually, pessimism also has its benefits. It can give you a more accurate perception of reality. Reading this book is not about blindly and unconditionally applying optimism to all situations, because that would sacrifice the benefits of pessimism. The author hopes to give you a resilient optimism to enhance your control over adverse environments. Learning to consider setbacks and difficulties from a more encouraging perspective, teaching you to apply optimism at any time and facing life with hope. The original book link is attached at the end for further reading. You can also click the share button below the video to share this book with your friends. Congratulations, you've just finished another book.